Hello and welcome to Gifted, Talented and Neurodiversity Awareness Week. As a proud partner of the G Word film, we are super excited to be involved again this year. Thank you to Marc and his team for being behind GTN Awareness Week. It is a lot of fun. And this week the theme is around equity and joy. And at our Gifted Kids, we've decided to focus on the joy component because, well, we all need a bit of joy. And, it can be really taboo to talk about gifted joy and those things that the gifted community really loves and does well and gets excited about and, like, let's face it, totally geeks out on. And I thought, what a great opportunity for us to just spend a week talking about the things that really get us excited and bring joy into our life. So we're kicking off the week with a podcast with Kate Donohue. And Kate is one of my favorite people. She has been working in the disability sector for more than 20 years. She's been a DIR therapist, kindergarten and school teacher, service leader, mentor, support worker, and public speaker and presenter. Kate herself is neurodivergent and found ways to thrive in her own unique way in a world that is not designed for people who are different. This gives her valuable insights and a natural ability to relate. Her work experience includes researching disability inclusion in Norway, working with youth at risk in Canada, and supporting children with severe and complex needs in the Cook Islands and rural Australia. Kate has facilitated many parent support groups and communities. But her learning journey really began when she became a parent to two neurodivergent girls and began to explore her own neurodivergence from a neurodivergent affirming perspective. She's supported hundreds of neurodivergent people and their families, educators, therapists, and employers in the last 20 years. She has a deep understanding of neurodivergence, which she uses to mentor, educate, and support, regardless of where people are on their journey. I often suggest that people get in touch with Kate when they have really complex kiddos and really complex families, because she's just one of those people that really gets the complexity and how one thing impacts on another. So it was fabulous today to talk to Kate about play and why play is really important and why it's different for us as neurodivergent folk. So it's despite we were both a little bit knackered and my brain was probably a bit slower than Kate, she did a great job. And despite that, really great episode on some really important things to keep in mind as parents and as people when it comes to play and exploring our joy. So I hope that you enjoy it. Now, as Gifted, Talented and Neurodiversity Awareness Week, you can register at the G Word and stay on top of all the free stuff that goes on this week, because there is a lot out there and some really cool things. So please check out those links. Also, here at Our Gifted Kids, we are putting a podcast on every single day. So it's a big week for us. And I hope you enjoy those. You can subscribe at Our Gifted Kids and not miss anything. We've also got our doors open to our 3 new online communities. So you can check them out at ourgiftedkids.com/hub and see what the fuss is all about. There's a couple of cool videos there that show you what our online portals look like and tell you a bit more about what we offer. And it's just a way, the whole point of all this is, how do we make the journey easier for parents, for us as people, for our kids, and bringing together all of the knowledge, the experts, the professional, the parents, the lived experience, so that we can feel seen, we can feel heard, we can feel less alone, we can stay quirky. So stay quirky, have fun, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted, because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. I'm here with Kate Donohue, one of my favorite people, because it's anyone listening, it's like Monday of week one. No, it's not. It's Monday of day one of Gifted, Talented, and Neurodiversity Awareness Week. And we're here to talk to Kate about play, because play is this massive part of joy, play, right? And our brains are both a little bit fried. So this will be an interesting conversation. I'm trying to do effectively 7 podcasts in a week and a half. So I'm a little bit fried. I always enjoy these things, but they're a challenge to get through. So I hope everyone's loving these episodes and listening and sharing. So Kate, welcome. You've been a guest on the podcast before, and you, just for anyone who hasn't come across Kate before, you can go back and listen to previous episodes. She's just an awesome person, and one of the few folk out there who just kind of gets that very deep complexity of neurodivergence. And welcome. It's a delight to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm very excited to be talking about play, because over 15 years ago, I started my first degree in early childhood development, which was all about the importance of play. And then I went out into the real world of teaching and parenting and realized that our society and our culture has a very different view on play than what the research says about the importance of play and the developing brain and body. So this is a topic that I love to talk about. So thank you for inviting me.
And anyone who's watching the video on our online portal, Kate's brought along her bunny.
But yes, this is Blue. Oh, Blue's shy. Blue. He's hiding.
He's snuggling. It's so beautiful. Hello, Blue. Welcome to the podcast as well. Yeah, play, right? As a parent, I came across Montessori philosophy quite early in parenthood. And one of the things that I really love that's always stuck with me was they say something along the lines of play is the work of children. It's literally that important. It is their work, and it should be respected and not interrupted. And we should allow that grace for them when they're playing and getting into things, because they're doing real work for themselves.
Absolutely. It is what children are generally naturally drawn to. It's the space where they are actively involved, their whole brain, their entire body. And when real problems arise, this is when they can actually access different parts of themselves. So it's when we're teaching children, they have it's a lot less effective, because their engagement level varies, their interest level, their capacity, where they're at as an individual. But play, they come at it from where they are at that time. So it is always very relevant to them. And the thing that we miss, so in Scandinavian countries, they don't introduce formal literacy and numeracy learning until about 7 years of age, and their outcomes are much better than other places where we start at 5. So we have this idea that repetition is best, and really narrowing down into what learning can look like. But children's brains and bodies are much more dynamic than often what we think as adults. There are many things that are underlying development that we don't know about. For example, if a child is struggling to write, the best option isn't always to get them to practice with a pencil more and more. This doesn't always produce very good outcomes, because there are some underlying fine motor skills that need to be developed. So playing with Play-Doh, playing in the sand, building things with their fingers is actually what they need before they can start to write. So doing more of the same thing won't necessarily get better results. Doing a broad range of activities like what play can offer, one, it is actually what they need for their developing bodies, and two, it is very engaging. So they're invested in this. We as neurodivergent people, when we are in that flow state, when we are engaged in what we're doing, our brains are 400 times more effective at learning than a neurotypical brain. So as gifted and neurodivergent people, particularly as kids, the ability to throw our whole selves into our passions is our learning style. It is how we learn best. So if we're stopping our children, and this is the way school's designed, to from that deep dive, because we go really, really deep, we go really, really broad. We want to know all the connections and all the pieces and know about our passion at that time, but we can't do that in small blocks. That is really difficult because transitions are often really difficult. Switching tasks are really difficult, and sometimes starting a task, even if we want to. So there's executive function differences in a neurodivergent brain, including gifted children and adults, that mean that some of the structures we have in society don't allow us to get the best out of our brains, to really be able to develop the skills to know how to follow our passions and interests. Because sometimes when we watch our kids, we kind of sometimes are like, I wish they would put as much energy and effort into, getting ready for school or going to school or reading or science, when that's not their passion. But we have to trust that they're learning a lot of skills in the play and the engagement that they're doing. We just don't always know where they're going, so we can't control what they're learning, how they're learning, what they're doing. Particularly a lot of our gifted kids, they charge full ahead, and we're just struggling to keep up and run behind them to try and help them to, or well, we need to understand where they're at so we can support them. But and the analogy we were talking about before this podcast is sometimes we mistaken ourselves for being the engineer of our children, and this isn't the case. We're actually more like a shepherd, so that we're providing the environment, we're supporting them, we're scaffolding them, and we're encouraging them to be themselves and learning ways that work for them. And play is the perfect medium to be able to do that.
So a few things you've said there. I mean, there's a bunch of things you said there, but a few really relevant that jump out for gifted neurodiverse kids is like repetition is not as great as it sounds, and doing more of the same. So it's that typical kind of thing of, oh, they're gifted, give them more worksheets. And it's kind of like, actually, that's the number one way to lose engagement, and make for a very unhappy gifted child, is just more worksheets. But what we could be doing instead is respecting that depth, that deep dive, and actually creating that space for them to get fully engaged in what they're really engaged about, which I think is important to know and get as a parent, because we want to help, we want to support, we want to see them improve in those areas where they might be struggling, and they're racing off ahead of us and we're trying to keep up and provide opportunities. It can get really kind of overwhelming, and it can be hard to know, are we doing the right thing? Is it too much? Is it not enough? But some of what you've said there is take a breath and play, because within that play and that special interest, you're actually going to get the focus and the skill development on those things that they need, without kind of feeling like we've got to force the issue all the time. Because I know myself having to have learnt that lesson, especially in the early days, of kind of trusting in the journey and trusting in your kids,
Yeah.
and understanding how important it is to support those special interests, even though they might seem a bit odd, or they might be, okay, we're memorizing all of the Pokemon, or, we're memorizing all of the train timetables, or I don't know, whatever quirky kind of thing it might be. But what I found is one thing will lead to another. And you never know where you will end up. That Pokemon obsession and learning them all may end up with some creative writing, stop motion animation, and it's kind of like, where can we take that special interest? How can we expand on that a bit and explore, because they're so engaged in that particular play. So, and I think this is one of the things I wanted to talk with you about today is the special interest, and how important that is to the gifted neurodivergent brain. and how much we need to kind of honor and respect that space because it's a space that really does provide intense joy and satisfaction, regardless of how quirky it is.
And it's deeper than that as well. It's also how we identify. Often, for many neurodivergent people, we relate to our special interests just like a child relates to significant family members. So, spending time with that interest builds a sense of well-being and a sense of self. Joining a child in their special interests also builds a strong bond because you're bonding in a safe place for them, a place that makes sense for them, a part of who they are and a part of their identity, and you're choosing to join in with that. So it's a lot deeper, particularly if for neurotypical people to understand our relationship to our special interests should be seen as a significant relationship that we would have with someone important in our life. That's why it's really important not to take away interests as punishments or to interfere with that, because it would be similar to taking a parent away from a child because they threw something. Like, we've got to really be mindful that special interests are relationships that need to be protected, that need to be invested in, and from that place, it's not just about the content of what they're learning. If they're learning geography, you might be like, great. If they're learning about Pokemon, you might be like, oh, that's not valuable. But it is, because underneath that are dispositions for learning. And that's what's important, and what sets us up for success later on is, how do I problem solve? Like, it's all the things that are going on in their brain, all the neurons that are developing through the activity, even if we don't value the activity within itself. So we can often think, oh, but they've spent so much time doing this thing that I don't think is actually very educational or valuable. But there's a lot of things going on underneath. And the thing is, yes, it might be better if they were doing other things, but that's not real. That's not who they are. That's not where they're at that time. And often I find parents say things like, oh, but they won't join me in other things. I try and play with that. I try and engage them in other things that other kids their age are engaging in. We always must join our children first. So when we bond with our children and we engage with them, and that relationship is really enjoyable for them and mutually respectful, we've got a lot more scope to say, hey, I found this really exciting thing I'd love to share with you. And they're more likely to be able to join in with us. And that's also developing reciprocity and social skills, but it's done from a place of joy rather than a place of, we should be doing this. So when we come from that really authentic place, this is very therapeutic for our kids who struggle with other relationships, because we're role modeling how to follow their lead, and then maybe inviting them to follow our lead. So there's a lot we can do by joining our children very naturally, and by seeing where they're at in that space. And if we decide we want to be able to introduce them to other things, we can just trial that out. And it's okay if they don't. That moment they might not be ready. But if we do it with a lot of safety and we do it with a lot of care and consideration, there's more scope to be able to do those things in the future.
I really like that. Just the simplicity of, what is my child into, right? Shall we spend an hour doing that? And I mean, to be sure, as a parent, it can get a bit exhausting
Yes.
listening to the special interests, because they will tell you for a long time, many times, in great depth and detail. And so I want to validate and acknowledge how exhausting that can be. But at the same time, I've certainly seen and experienced that connection from just taking the time and kind of going, oh, tell me what you've learned in that thing, or what's your newest kind of fact of the day, or yeah, just even a small amount of connection on that point can be really beautiful. And I think, yeah, I think the kids feel really seen by that as well, which is really nice.
I'd like to extend what you're saying about the challenges of the reality of doing this,
Mhm.
because a lot of
Yeah.
what I do is about reality and how complex it can be. So it's okay to say things like, I can see this is really important for you right now, but I have a bit of a traffic jam going in my brain. I'm going to go grab a cup of tea, take a couple of breaths. One, we're role modeling regulation. We're also putting some boundaries around. And not all kids can cope with boundaries, but if your child can, it's okay to say, this, I can see this is really, really important to you, and I want to be able to be in a position to listen or to join you. I'm going to grab my snacks or going to grab my cup of tea, and then we can go from there. And then that gives you a moment to prepare, because sometimes it's a lot. Like sometimes my
Mm.
brain hurts. Like I literally am like, I don't think I can like hear any more words. They're just, even if I wanted to, I'm having sensory overload. So it's okay to talk to our kids and go, this is really important. My brain's not really working right now. Let me go and do something about that. And then we can come back and connect. Or, you know, the logistics of like, I am in the middle of dinner right now and I'm really struggling to do two things at once. Can we put a timer on? Can we make a special time? Can we make a date to do that? So it's about working it in, and there's no perfection in any of this. We are so hard on ourselves and so many different ideas about what's important. Like I'm very clear in what I teach about what's important, and it's always based in regulation and relationship. So there are many wonderful things we can do as parents. We can provide all sorts of things, being that shepherd in that pasture. But everything comes back down to if our child is not regulated and our relationship is, and if our relationship is fractured, none of those things are going to matter. So there are often times when I've wanted to pursue my children's special interests with them, say going to a science fair, but I'm pretty sure that the drive home is not going to go well. And, you know, particularly when I had two young children and I was on my own, I'd be like, I don't think I can co regulate them after a full day of sensory overload at a science fair. So I've had to make a decision that investing in their special interests in that way isn't in the best interest of our relationship and regulation. So we've done other things. So we don't have to do everything and be everything if we can't manage it. It's okay to make other choices and make sure it's sustainable. And the underlying message is we love you, or I love you. What you love is important to me, and I'm going to show up for you in that way where I can. But we don't have to be able to do that at all times. And if we can't, that's okay. They might not always like that, but we can try and work towards regulating and supporting them around that as well.
And like you say, that's great modeling of, by being just honest with our kids of where we're at, what we can manage, what we can get through is really great modeling for them if we're, you know, talking that out loud with them, which is really great. My brain's gone a bit blank.
It's okay. I think we've done quite well since we're
I think so
sleep
as well.
deprived.
I'm like, that's a pretty good podcast. So in modeling to our kids that we're trying to take care of our own regulation as well, it's obviously really important for us as parents to model that in a positive way, which can be tricky in the moment. So have you got any thoughts on that for us, Kate?
Absolutely. So neurodivergent people are wired very different to neurotypical people. So we do have a tendency to do things that what are often referred to as monologuing or sharing from our perspective, which isn't always two-way and reciprocal. And this is just the way that our brains are wired. So it's really important that we communicate that we care about their interests and who they are, because that is linked to identity, as we mentioned before. But we get a lot of shame, or we get told that what we're doing is not okay because the world doesn't quite understand the neurodivergent brain. And gifted kids are intense. Our curiosities, as an adult gifted kid, you know, then I've had to suppress so much of who I am, my identity, my intensities, to not overwhelm or get criticism from others. And that actually taps into mental health and well-being when we do this too much. So we really want to prevent any of those messages where we're saying that it's a character flaw, or you're too much, or you're too intense, or you're too dramatic, or you're not compliant enough or cooperative enough, or any of those things, because those messages get internalized. And of course, sometimes we make mistakes, but we can always come back and say, oh, I'm really sorry that I said this. It came out because I was stressed. What I meant to say is that the noise was just so overwhelming for me that I needed a break, but I didn't take it early enough. So I think next time I'm going to take that break a bit earlier, because it's not on you. Like, you know, your curiosity, you know, is an amazing quality within you. So we're framing the challenges around needs. So I need some more quiet space. I was overwhelmed because I was doing three things at once. I would like to meet your needs of connection through your interest, but I need to make sure it's working for my needs as well, which is a tricky conversation to have if we're not used to speaking in terms of needs we're often used to going to, you're too much, or stop that, or be quiet, or I've already told you 3 times that, to go and do your shoes and not talk about rocks. So we're really in this time and space where there is more information about neurodivergent brains, and we're having to relearn how to parent. So we need to also be compassionate with ourselves when we say these things, but also aware that we need to own those mistakes as well, so that we're framing that we care, we love them, we find them as they are, lovable. They don't need to change to be someone else, but meeting needs in the family system is really important. So talking about our need for being able to get dinner done. I need to be able to concentrate on dinner right now. And then rather than saying you're too loud. So it's a shift in language that sometimes isn't instinctual, but that's the journey of growth, right? That's why we're listening to this podcast. That's why we're reading books. That's why we're on groups around neurodiversity, because our way of being has never been validated. It's almost like our way of being in the world didn't exist. We had to either mask or get excluded because of our differences. And that's starting to change now, but we all have this internalized ableism. Even us who have these disabilities, we have to unpack the messages that it's not okay to be this way, or it's too much. So unpacking, unfortunately, it's a hard thing to face in ourselves, but unpacking internalized ableism or externalized ableism is a part of this parenting journey that we're really called to be on, so that we can provide emotionally safe relationships and spaces for our kids, so they do get a better sense of belonging than those of us who grew up in the decades before, because we want them to grow up to be healthy and well. That's what we all want. And a primary need for all of us is to feel like we belong. And if we're getting lots of small messages or large messages that what we're doing excludes us or isn't okay, then we don't develop that sense of belonging. And that's a foundational need. And when needs aren't met, there are often secondary health issues and mental health issues. So by working on how we frame and how we think, it actually comes from the thinking as well, or catching our thinking and changing our thinking. When we do this work, we can actually change the course of our children and the impact that we have on them.
Yeah, so the messages that we're getting from the world, within our families, unintentionally, can be really important to have a look at and be conscious about. And so a couple of things I was thinking of there is, that moment in the afternoon where it's all a bit loud, and instead of going, you're all too noisy, reframing and going, my brain is feeling completely overwhelmed with sound. Can you use your inside voices? Can you go play outside for me, which would really help me? I'm also going to go put my ear things in because I'm going to look after myself in that way, and I'm going to turn the music off, and kind of talking about it in terms of what we need to open up those conversations about needs and expressing those, which I think is really great and can be a shift in terms of that parenting language. I certainly have gotten in the habit of having a very similar conversation to what I just described, because I do get really overwhelmed with noise. And sometimes we have music on a lot, which I usually like. And sometimes I'll just be like, I'm sorry, I just can't deal with the sound. That sound. Is it okay if we turn the music off? And just kind of communicate where I'm at with members of my family, which I think is really helpful. So we introduced this Gifted, Talented Neurodiversity Awareness Week last week with an episode with Marc Smolowitz from the G Word. And one of the things he was talking about was the reason why the theme for this week is about joy, or part of the theme is joy, is because as a community, a neurodivergent community, there has been a real taboo around celebrating those things which bring us joy, celebrating those areas where we succeed, especially in the gifted realm, sometimes wildly succeed because it brings us joy and it's very much a part of who we are and what comes naturally to us. And there's a real taboo about that, which just kind of sucks. And so this was an opportunity for a week to kind of go, this is what brings me joy, and I want to share it. and I want to talk about it and hopefully get a little bit of validation to go deep dive into that thing as a parent and encouraging your kids because as you've said, during this podcast, it's a really important part of the way our brain works, our identity, our key relationships, those things that we deeply love and bring us joy. And, this week is a real opportunity to have a little look around at yourself and your family members and maybe just take a moment to kind of think, well, what is it that brings them joy? What is it that brings me joy? And how can we get involved in that or support that or reframe that now that we understand what an important thing these deep special interests are and the different things that can bring us joy? And if anyone wants to, share that thing that brings them joy, like tag our gifted kids and share it online or we would love to highlight those things that bring people joy because it's one of the things that I love the most about our neurodivergent and gifted community are the very wide ranging random things that people get into. And it's just, I love listening to people talk about their stuff because it's this very deep expert level knowledge of stuff. And
Mm.
it's fabulous, I think.
One of the really important things that have stuck with me is when somebody said that a lot of neurodivergent people have an internal curriculum. It doesn't line up with the school curriculum or the expectations that society has of people at certain ages, but we need to trust that our neurodivergent people are going to learn and grow. It may not look like how everybody else does it, but it's a very valuable and important thing that we give them the space to do that because this is being neurodivergent affirming. This is allowing our child to be and grow as they need to. So, and then amazing things happen. Like I have had a 20-year special interest in development, attachment, relationships, autism, neurodiversity. And now I get to do every single day what I love. I can have a really bad sleep. I can have a really bad day. And then I jump online and I do consults and sessions, and every single one, even the challenging ones, I'm like, I have the best job ever. Like, I always feel better about my life and what I'm doing because I'm able to connect with people around my passion, that I'm getting paid to talk to people about the thing that I've, took such a deep dive and looked at in such a broad way for the last 20 years. And not everybody makes a career out of their passion, but a lot of us do when we're given the time and space and allowed to explore who we are. And there are some really interesting entrepreneur sort of enterprises popping up all over the place. But the important thing is to keep our children well and healthy from a mental health perspective, because we often shut these things down about ourselves. But this is our I guess our talent, right? Is to go deep, is to go broad, is to be an expert. And the way the world is moving forward is experts are going to be highly sought after. And whether it's in drains and how the flow of water goes through pipes, that's a specialist industry. And whether it's about autism and neurodiversity. So by really trusting our children's internal curriculum and supporting that and being in awe of that and being like, yeah, that's great, you do you. One of my kids is into beauty at the moment. Like, she's gifted, and I have no issues about directing her path in any direction. If she wants to wax legs and eyebrows for the rest of her life and that brings her joy, I'm happy with that because that's her. That's me really respecting and seeing her for who she is, not who I think she should be. And I think we
Mhm.
get a bit stuck in that when we're looking at neurodivergent people because we don't fit in boxes. And in order to have that joy, we need to be given that space to play, to then learn about who we are. This is how we find ourselves. So it's a very essential part of our childhood is to be able to explore our relationship with our special interests because it helps us find who we are.
Absolutely. I mean, what better goal in life is there, or what could you wish more as a parent for your child than for your kids to wake up every day and do something that they love? And as parents, we can't choose the things they love. they're going to love what they love. So it's our opportunity to support them in that and grow in that area. Thank you, Kate, for joining us today. I think it's been hopefully a really helpful, insightful chat for parents about play and joy. And hopefully people will have something there to think about this week. And maybe if you're listening, you would like to share with us what your joy is. We would really love that, regardless of whether it's still Gifted, Talented, Neurodiversity Week or not. We're always up for sharing the joy. Before we go, Kate, tell us how people can get in touch with you, because you work online, you do a lot of Zoom, so you can work with people from all over the place. So we will put your website in the show notes, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have two things that I support parents with. Essentially, most of what I do is with parents because it's what I'm passionate about. It's about helping parents to understand their individual child's needs and also who they are and how they can be that mentor in their child's life. So I do group sessions. I have a community where I've got a recorded course which you can go through at your leisure with a heap of online resources. And then we catch up every fortnight and talk about everything and anything that comes up. And it is about that, how do we do life with our children? Because we aren't as supported in the same way as other parents. Many of our children need accommodations at school, can't attend school. There's extra health issues that we need to manage as well. There's the executive functioning load, the appointments. There's so many other parts to parenting that are invisible to society that we don't get a lot of support with. So really it's about bringing those parts and we talk through these things together. We also have a focus which I prepare prior. So we talk about what is alexithymia or what is spoon theory, and we can discuss those things as well. But also I do one-on-one sessions as well where we unpack what's going on and really have a deep look at what might be going on for your child or for yourself as a parent, and we work through the complexities of parenting.
I highly recommend it. Anyone with highly, doesn't have to be, but those parents that I meet with super complex kiddos and lots going on, I'm always like, yeah, maybe you should go have a chat with Kate.
I love
because
they're the people I love. Like, come and chat to me because that's the life I've lived and that's the person who I've been. I've got like 5 different disabilities. So, and so do my kids and so do all the people that I work with. Like, the people come to me when they have often PDA profiles, often 2E profiles. So girls who haven't been diagnosed because of their internalizing profile, people with 5 or 6 different diagnoses, children who can't go to school, violent and complex behaviours. These are the things that I support parents with. And this is the area that I feel very passionate about because I find that it's really important to do that deep dive because it is often very complex. There's no simple strategy. You can't just follow a textbook or a training program because it is really about how do we help our child to know that they're loved and supported while also helping them to navigate the world while they're really struggling within their body. And that's a really complex task as a parent.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So if that resonates with you, super complex kiddos, families, grown-ups, definitely check out Kate and find her online at Dynamic Parenting, and links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute delight.
I've absolutely loved it. Always love being on your podcast and just talking because we're on such the same level, and being able to talk about what we're interested in is an absolute pleasure.
It is, and both geek out on our favorite things.
It's great.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.